evening, everyone, and welcome to the J Free 906 podcast. Tom Burns and I here tonight, and we have a very special engagement. Normally, we'd be out here, we'd be talking about the Curse of Oak Island or Skinwalker Ranch or one of those types of shows. But I tell you, tonight's going to be a very special evening because we have a very special guest. You guys all know this man already. Anybody that's familiar with the Curse of Oak Island already knows Dr. Aaron Taylor. And he has been on a special mission that is a very noble mission. And when I heard about it, Tom and I both, we were talking about this, and we just felt that we had to bring him on and talk about this because it is something that I find personally very emotional to me.
Yes, it is indeed.
Yeah, and so we thought that we had to share this with each and every one of you guys that the what he's doing and how he goes about this. So let's get right to it. So without further ado, let me please welcome to the stage Dr. Aaron Taylor. Aaron, how you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing very well, and thank you very much, Jeff and Tom, for having me back on your show. I was trying to think if this is my third or fourth time on your show, and
I think it's four.
I always love doing it. It's always a lot of fun. Your audience has great questions and comments, so it was my pleasure to be back on your show and talking about something that I know you're passionate about. Others are passionate about it, and I'm certainly very passionate about this subject.
Yep. As Linda put up there, she put up that tonight we are Dr. Taylor. We're doing this a little bit differently tonight, folks, because Aaron has a presentation. I have seen this a little bit, and he's going to go through that presentation for us tonight. So we're going to let him do that, and then we're going to hold all questions until he's done with the presentation, and then we'll open the floor for questions.
Jot your questions down, because I saw the presentation myself previously, and I was writing down questions, feverishly, and then as Aaron will go along, your questions you might find will be answered.
Yeah, exactly. He may answer it as you go along. So, but we don't want to interrupt his presentation. So we would just ask you to please, if you put it up ahead of time, we're probably not going to see it. If you do a super chat, we won't put it on screen, but we will get to it. You'll be ahead of the line if you do a super chat. You get ahead of the line on that when we do open up for questions. So, so let's dive into it. Aaron, you've got this, and you're calling this presentation "Finding Our Fallen."
Right.
And you've got involved with a U.S. government agency to find MIA soldiers abroad. Tell us a little bit about this program and how you got started with it.
Yeah, so I've been really interested in this program for decades. Really, I've been following it. I've been writing to the U.S. government saying, I'm an archaeologist. I'd love to get involved. And getting, thank you, but no thanks sort of thing. And so fast forward, I was on the Curse of Oak Island, loved my season on it. And I was a little thank you. I was a little disappointed I wasn't brought back. I made a lot of really good friends on that show, and I know why, but anyway, I tell my daughters, and my students at the university, with disappointment, the old cliche, when one door closes, another one opens.
Absolutely.
And so that's exactly what happened. I finally, I talked to St. Mary's University, where is one of the universities I teach at. And I proposed running it through St. Mary's, and the DPAA, Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, we call it the DPAA, the branch of the U.S. government that does the recovery and ID program of U.S. military personnel from past conflicts. They actually did a 1-year a mission with St. Mary's back in 2017, and then it just sort of died. So after being on the show, I contacted again the DPAA and said, "Can we run it through St. Mary's? You've done it once. I'm in it for the long haul," and they said, "Sure." So persistence paid off, and now I'm doing what I really feel is a dream job. And you had mentioned it as a noble endeavor. It absolutely is. It's a sacred duty, I believe, that when you send your young people off to foreign lands to fight in wars, it is your obligation, it is your sacred duty to, when possible, bring them home to their families. And it doesn't matter if it's they've been missing for a year, a decade, 7 decades. If you go on YouTube, you can see these military. There's lots of videos of military funerals, and they're all very heartbreaking. One, just briefly, a sister, her brother went to the Korean War and never returned. And 72 or 3 years later, he was recovered, and he was brought home to be buried, military funeral. And the sister, who was quite elderly, they interviewed her, and she said many things, but one of the things that really struck me, and I've heard this over and over again, is she said, "This has hurt my heart for over 70 years, but today it hurts a little less."
Wow.
And I get very emotional talking about it. And there's all these families. Part of the grieving process for the human species, and I know in archaeology, you go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and there's funerary practices. It's part of the grieving process to, bury a body.
Right.
And when someone's missing, it leaves a hole. So, as I said, it is a passion of mine. I did a mission, which I'm going to talk about, in France last summer with students and volunteers, and I'll be going to Austria in May with another group of students and volunteers for another U.S. bomber that was downed, crashed. And also part of my program presentation is talking about the lack of a Canadian program. And so I'm working with Acadia University, and we're in the very initial stages, but creating a Canadian program, because there's, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but there's over 27,000 Canadians missing from the First and Second World War.
Wow.
And we're not actively looking for them. And I think it's a shame. It's an embarrassment. And if the only reason we're not doing it is because we don't want to spend the money, I think that's a horrible reason not to do it. If you send your young people off to fight in battles, and I'll say it again, it is your obligation and sacred duty, when possible, to bring them home.
Yep.
Absolutely true. Yeah. I mean, I can say, I'm old enough to say that I've been fortunate enough never to witness a war of that magnitude, but I worked with a lot of people that went to war. And if you ever heard some of their stories, they deserve to be brought home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So without further ado, I'll start my presentation. I originally gave this presentation back in November at Acadia University. I had a student also who was with me back in France. She talked for a few minutes. So I'll go past her slides. Presentation should take about 45 minutes, and then I'll be open for questions, as Jeff mentioned. So,
okay.
So I'll start at the end and I'll work forward. So this is the last day. We had finished our month in the field. We're all tired. It was exhausting work, but real sense of pride and commitment. And I couldn't be prouder of the students. Some of them had mentioned that they first thought that this was going to be, a month in France. What a great way to get some credits. But they quickly realized that this wasn't just another field school, that we were actually looking for a loved one, and it really sunk in for everyone. And students were not, in a month, you can imagine students would not be feeling well, volunteers, headaches, sore backs, and the students refused to take even a day off. Stomach issues. They said, no, we are staying until we find this person. And it was really inspiring for me. So this is the last day photo. So who are we working with? And I'm sure many of you Americans know about this. It's called the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, or DPAA. It's changed its name over the years. And their mission is to find the fullest possible accounting for its MIA from past conflicts. And so what that means is they realize they can't recover everyone. There's about 82,000 missing Americans from the Second World War, Korean conflict, Vietnam, Iraq. But it's to provide the fullest of possible accounting. And a lot of it is dead ends. No, we're not going to be able to recover that person, but at least they're looking into every MIA case. The program really took off in the 1980s after the Vietnam War, when there was a lot of missing Americans, POWs. And so the US government under Ronald Reagan wanted to really put an effort and money behind this effort in finding out what happened to these people. Tied in with that was also, when you find a bone, what do you do with it? Well, in the 1980s, 90s, DNA technologies really started to get perfected. So now, even if you found a tiny bone fragment with DNA and later mitochondrial DNA, you can trace it through the maternal line. It was great because you only need a tiny amount of mitochondrial DNA to make a match. So now you could go out and attempt these recoveries, find something, and make a match, which in the past you really couldn't do that. World War I casualties are a lot more difficult. So the U.S. only looks at World War II and forward. The records just weren't there. A lot of the battlefields, if you think of the Battle of the Somme, Ypres, Passchendaele, it's just a quagmire. And a lot of soldiers just were swallowed up with live rounds, bombs. It was very dangerous, very difficult. And so it was decided that they're really going to target World War II and forward. Most of the DPA's budget goes towards looking in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. But they do have a very robust program looking for World War II. And that's most of what I do is looking at World War II recoveries. Canada has a passive program. We were active until 1921. So right after the First World War, we were sending teams out to do active recoveries. But in 1921, we switched over to a passive program. So if, as I mentioned, a French farmer while plowing his field comes across human remains, there's a Canadian patch. We have one forensic anthropologist, so they become involved and they look into it, but we don't actively look for our MIA. As I mentioned, the USA has over 82,000. Now, the DPA believes approximately 40% are recoverable, and that's a huge number. Canada has 27,000 as MIA from World War I and II. Approximately 8,000 are from World War II, and 16 are from the Korean conflict. Interesting, the 16, it was a patrol of 16 men, and they went out and they were just never heard from again. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a couple of slides from now, but the best hope for finding people is in downed aircraft. We know essentially where the crashes went down. In Canada, there's 1,886 crew personnel is listed as MIA from crashes in the European theater during World War II. And after each mission, there was a missing aircrew report written and giving the general location of the crash. How many parachutes did you see? And so that's really the area that we want to target is crashed planes. But you know, it's not just crashed planes, but I think that's the highest potential.
Right.
And here's just as I've mentioned, the battlefield of Passchendaele. It was a really big battle for the Canadians. We lost a lot of people in Passchendaele, and you can just imagine these holes just literally swallowed soldiers up with munitions, and it just makes recovery very, very difficult in these areas. This is what you might think of as a crash bomber. You know, recoveries in these sort of things are quite easy. And when the American Graves Registries went out after the Second World War, they did a lot of recoveries, and this would have been easy. However, unfortunately, many of the crashes look like this. Even smaller fragments. The site in France, the fragments of the plane were tiny. They just hit with such force that, you know, sometimes the Germans would come to a crash site. The locals would come to a crash site, and if there were bodies, they would take them, bury them in local cemeteries, or bury them nearby. But a lot of them, the bodies were so traumatized that they were just fragments, and you know, people didn't know what to look for, and so they just essentially just stayed mingled in the crash site. There's another one, so you have an idea of what we're looking at. This was the Commonwealth War Graves Commission in France, and so they're responsible for the missing MIA in Belgium and France. And so we were invited to bring the students and volunteers for a tour of their lab and see how they do things. Now, for a long time, the Canadian government, you know, well, we don't. There's too many obstacles as well. It's not just the money; it's the obstacles. Well, I met with the director of this commission, and his role is to now, about 3 years ago, to facilitate not just Americans, because the Americans had a special relationship or with the French government on doing these, so they had a special agreement. But none of the other allied countries were even interested in pursuing it. But his role is to facilitate other allied countries on doing recovery missions in France and Belgium, which there's a lot of recoveries still left in those two countries. So we got to go there, see how they do things. Fascinating. So technology, as I talked briefly, the advancements in technology that we can now use for recoveries. Ground penetrating radar for clandestine burials. Often during a battle, you know, so the Americans would take a hill and they'd lose a lot of people. They'd bury the people quickly because they didn't have time to evacuate the bodies. So they bury them. You know, you often see a rifle stuck in the ground with a helmet on it. Well, of course, there'd be a counterattack. The Germans would retake the land, and the graves would get lost. And so this ground penetrating radar is great for working in fields where you suspect there's burials, and it can penetrate down into the ground pretty accurately, almost to a meter. So it's really great for shallow graves. As I mentioned, DNA, huge advancements in that. So when we find human remains, even a tooth, a bone fragment, we send it to either a lab. There's a lab run by the U.S. government in Hawaii. They mostly deal with Pacific Islands, Southeast Asian remains. There's another lab in Nebraska. So when we find material evidence or bone, anything organic, we bag it because we're the recovery team, and we send it to one of these labs, and hopefully they're able to extract enough DNA that they can do matches. And usually it's about 1.5 to 2 years. And if they're successful, then they notify the family, and the family can either decide to have the person buried in the United States, or they can have them buried where other members of the unit were buried in Europe. So it's the family's choice on what happens to the remains once they've been identified. Oh, sorry. You have forensic anthropologists, the hit show Bones. So their job is not just the DNA, but examining the bones, making a biological uh, identification, looking at the bones. They can tell, the biological affinity. Is this person African descendant, European, indigenous? So they can do a lot of things to help identify the person, the age of death, height. They can sex it, provided they have enough of the remains. If you just have bone fragments, then really you're just looking at DNA. Interesting. A clavicle bone, your collarbone. It's very unique to each person. And in World War II, they started doing X-rays of their lungs to see if they had tuberculosis or anything wrong with their lungs. Well, the offshoot of that was it also took X-rays, images of their chest, and so if you can match up a clavicle with the X-ray, that's another great way of making an identification. And of course, dental records as well after World War II became quite important in identifying the remains. If you get a jawbone, if you get teeth. Here's one of my students metal detecting, so sweeping an area, and we dig down to what we call incident sterile. So when there's no more plane wreckage, that's when we stop, and that's a unit that we were digging. We dig 4 meter by 4 meter units, and then depending on what we find, we either create buffers and we just keep expanding that unit, or we keep moving on. We use this metal detector to create what we call a heat map, so areas of high concentration of wreckage, and it just helped us to target it. Here we were in this huge forest, and debris field is massive. When the plane came in, it went through the forest, spreading debris everywhere. And so that's a real logistical problem. Like, where do you start? And so we created this heat map, and we started from there. It guided where our excavations were. And here you can see the heat map. And of course, there was a road going right through it, so that didn't help matters. And it was often frequented by French people who love their forests, and they were very inquisitive about what we were doing. It was really important how that we were trying to keep a lot of this information confidential. And there's a lot of things in this presentation that I won't be able to talk about, and it's for reasons of not wanting to give family members false hope. So we're really careful what information we give out. I talked about this briefly. There's me in Belgium doing another dig with the Belgian translator. I was doing this with the University of Wisconsin. But I had mentioned that the DPAA did a recovery mission in 2017. 2021 hit, and I started making inquiries, and went in 2022 to Belgium, 2023 to France, and again I'll be heading to Austria in May, and possibly to Laos in Southeast Asia in July. So what sort of things are we looking for? We're looking for things, as I mentioned, obviously human remains, but we're also looking for things that can be tied directly to the person that we're looking for. A wedding ring with something engraved on it, a watch, his dog tags, something that can be tied directly to the person. life-saving gear, parachute, seatbelt, uniform, biological identification, DNA, bone, teeth. Often in this forest, the soil was extremely acidic. So bone or teeth is what you're really hoping for. It's your best chance of extracting the mitochondrial DNA. So we're really keeping an eye out for teeth. This is just an image of our site. Screeners. All of this equipment is provided by the DPAA, and it's stored in these big bins in Germany. And the day after we arrive, the bin shows up, and it's full of all our gear. And so we set up, and on the left you can see is our screening station. So all the soil gets screened. Just some of our team. You can see the road running right through our units. This is what it looks like. And again, full credit to the students and volunteers, 8 hours every day looking at this, trying to find a bone fragment that's been burned, a tooth. And it's really difficult work.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So we have a life-saving investigation station. So anything that we're not sure about or that could be directly tagged to the person, we take there. It's cleaned by a forensic anthropologist, and anything that we find, we bag as well and send it to the lab in either Nebraska or Hawaii. It's all counted. Everything is counted. All the airplane wreckage, whether it's tied or not, it's counted. And again, the stuff that we think is most valuable, we call probative material. It gets bagged, and first we have to send it to the directors of archaeology in the host country or government officials. They hold it, and then a representative from the DPAA comes and picks it up, and then they take it to Hawaii. So again, my work is just the recovery. They have historians, so historians research these files, and when they deem that there is potential that someone could be at this location, they send out an investigation team. This is a small number of people. They go meet with locals, check out the local cemeteries, talk to people, visit the site. And then if they say, yes, this is high potential, then they send out a recovery team. And that's usually probably 14 to 20 people. So this is the screening station, and everything gets counted. Things that we deem as important, we photograph it, document it. While we're doing this, I'm recording in my field book. I have all the students recording as well. It's a difference between, just digging your shovel in and going crazy. It's very systematic. It's very methodical. It takes time, but we really have to know where things are in order to guide our excavations, because you just don't want to be going around like a chicken with your head cut off. You have to take your time and do it properly, and you have to document it properly. There's an example of a button that we found. And this is just the airplane wreckage, but it gives you a real sense of how small the airplane wreckage is. Now, of course, after World War II, because metals were so scarce, a lot of the plane was scavenged. And so a lot of the stuff that was left were pieces of wreckage that looked like this. And in this stuff is where you find the bones and teeth. And so it's very challenging. This is an image from a student. I I have all the students. They write a reflection paper on the project, on what it meant to them to be a part of this. And one of my students said, "I speak better through art. Would it be okay if I did an assignment? If I did art instead of writing?" And I said, "Well, I really," she said, "like, this is how I communicate." And I said, "Oh, you don't know what to expect." And when she turned this in, I was in tears. She was in tears. And this really sums up, what we're doing. And her name's Bella McQuarrie, and she'll be coming back to Austria with us. And I have this hanging on my wall. And it's why we do it. And
Yeah, I mentioned it. That's a very powerful picture right there, drawing. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
very, very, very powerful. Here the students are. The town had made a monument for the crash victims, and the students, it all, the flower, the writing had all been, over the 20 years ago. So the students remade the plaque. They brought flowers, and this was all their idea. And so it gives you a sense of how important this was to them. And again, there wasn't a dry eye when we did this. And that's really the important thing is, how do we connect young people as our World War II veterans there's not many left anymore. How do we connect young people to this period? Because there's still so much to learn. And we look at what's going on in the world today, and how do we engage young people? And there's still so many lessons to be learned from World War II if we don't want to repeat it. And a lot of the students didn't know much about World War II. They learned a little bit about it in high school, but not that much. And they certainly know a lot about it now. And they realize the sacrifice that these young people, who were the same age as these people, the crew on these bombers, average age, I think, was 23. The pilot was 25, doing these incredible things, being asked day in, day after day to get up in these planes and go do these missions.
Yeah.
And I think it's 20%. You have a 20% likelihood of finishing your 25 missions.
Wow.
So, it was very impactful, especially for these young people. Again, I'm trying to start a Canadian program. And this is what my student, the artist, came up with us. And I'm thinking of making this into a flag. She's going to work on it a bit more. In French, fallen, not forgotten. So this might be our symbol for our Canadian program. But again, a very powerful image. The candle in the window, when someone would be out, in a storm, you'd put a candle in the window so they could find their way home. Yeah. And so that's what this image is about, with the Canadian maple leaf and the poppies at the bottom.
Wow.
I think, sorry. Did I? Yeah. So, just talk a little bit more about the Canadian program, if I could, just for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, please do.
So, I'm trying to get this as a students, as very grassroots. So I'm looking for support, because this is only gonna change if the Canadian public want it. And everyone I talk to can't believe we don't have a program. We need to have a program. The Americans say it doesn't matter how much it costs. It costs what it costs, and we're going to do it. And it is expensive. But again, this person gave their life. Families lost this loved one. So we're starting at grassroots. We're talking to our local politicians. We're talking to anyone we can find. If there's any Canadians out there who have a loved one who's missing in action still from either World War II or Korea, please contact me. I'd love to hear your story. This will help. And again, we have a lot of Canadians who are missing, and I really, really hope that we can get a program up and running within a couple of years. If the Canadian government doesn't want to back us, I will look for private donations. I will run bake sales to fund it if I need to, because that's how important this is. So again, if you're Canadians and you're watching this program, and you have a loved one who is missing, please contact me. I'd love to hear your story. And yeah, and so I'm open for questions. I'm happy to talk about this. If anyone wants to talk about Curse of Oak Island, I haven't been on it for a while, but I'm happy to always talk about the show and the treasure hunt. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff and Tom. And
okay. Well, first question I would have, Tom, and I'll let you go real quick after this one.
Okay.
Was you mentioned the best way to contact you. What would be that? What would be the best way to reach out to you on this? Do you have like
you.
Yep.
Yeah, you can contact me. I've taken this program from St. Mary's University to Acadia, and it's just aaron.taylor@acadiau.ca. So aaron.taylor@acadiau.ca. You might know Acadia University from my good friend and Curse of Oak Island favorite scientist, Dr. Ian Spooner. So yes, so he works with me at Acadia. So that's where I am, and that's where I brought this program. And we're trying to create the Acadia University MIA Recovery Project is what we're going to call it. So yeah, we're just starting out. And again, please contact me because I'd love to hear your stories.
I'm going to put that in the description of the show as well, so that if you forget it or didn't get it written down, you can always come back and check it later. I will get that in there for everyone.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's very, very, very powerful stuff. So when you go to do the investigation, or the investigation gets rolling, from the timeline that somebody actually identifies a potential site to you actually arriving on site with your recovery team, what kind of timeline is involved there?
It depends on the location, the host country. Some countries are very cooperative. Some countries are less cooperative. So there's a lot of factors. Some place like France, you can get one mission up and running within a year, probably. So there's a lot of factors involved. Some are longer than others.
Mhm.
Depends where you want to go.
Do you ever have any of the locals that get too inquisitive, or is it pretty much, yeah, we know what you're doing, and we're just going to go on about our way?
Yeah, that's a lot of them. There's a lot of looting, which is a concern for us. So, for example, we weren't advertising that we were there looking for a recovery mission. One student told someone who was starting to get a little bit inquisitive that we were Canadian soil researchers just looking at the soil around the tree roots, and the person's eyes glazed over and they were on their way. So she said, "Is that okay to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, I get it. That's fine with me."
Story worked. What the heck?
It worked. Yeah, exactly.
It worked. So, but most people are very sympathetic and supportive of what we do. So
I think we have a couple questions. So there we go. Jan asked Dr. Taylor, roughly how many family members have their DNA cataloged in the DNA banks?
that's a great question. I'm not sure offhand. Some don't, many don't. And so once an idea has been made, then the government reaches out and says, we've been looking for this person. There is some initial contact. And again, some just say, I want to put my DNA in a database in case. So again, it really depends. I don't know the numbers, but there's some who said, take my DNA in case there's a recovery, in case you find them. Others don't, but then they agree to do it, and some don't agree at all. So it really depends.
Linda, do you have another one you want to put up? I have a couple more, but I'm sure we have several here. I think, let's see here. Let's see. Yeah. Whoops. Okay. This one's from Laura. Aaron, I would like to be involved. My in-laws. I lived under Nazi occupation. You are doing great work. Let me know what I can do. And I think that's the sentiment of a lot of people here. Not about the in-laws living under Nazi occupation, but how can they, let us know, how can they help? I mean, is that something that, I guess, getting the word out to the Canadian government for one thing, or passing the word?
Yeah, getting the word out. Again, it's hard work, so I appreciate I think you're doing good work. There's a lot of my time that I'm spending away from my family. I have to write permits for these. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and a lot of work you do by yourself. And so I just appreciate the support, the emails, and just knowing that what I do is appreciated and valued, even though it shouldn't matter. I'm doing it because it's a passion of mine, but just knowing that there is support, that people do want this done, it means a lot to me. So I appreciate that. And as we get this Canadian program rolling, again, I'll be reaching out, and who knows, like maybe someone I could talk to, maybe
Yeah.
not sure.
Yeah, that was Laura from that. She went with you to Cuba. She was with you on
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Yep.
I hope we do it again.
Yeah. Oni's asking a question. What is the typical cost for an excursion to locate and retrieve remains?
So again, it depends where you're going. I know mission and the size of your team. So I know missions from $100,000 to $200,000 per mission is in the ballpark. So again, there's a lot of variables. Where are you going? How big is your team? How long are you going to go for? So it's not inexpensive, and I recognize that. And
so with the size of your team and the team selection process, I mean, to me, it's not a case of we're going to go to Oak Island and find a Roman coin and everybody gives each other high fives. In your case, you're actually going out and you're really finding something that's going to be truly personal and affect people.
Yep.
So in your selection process, do you have to be careful as who do you select to be on your team? Because that could be very emotional, I would think.
Absolutely. And there's a very robust vetting process. I've had for this upcoming Austria one over 30 applicants from students.
Oh, wow.
And so they need letters of recommendation from professors and employers. I have interviews with them. And you really need people who are mature. They understand why we're going, and the volunteers as well. And the thing is, a lot of people are like, oh, I'd love to go on this. And then when I start explaining to them what it is, so it's 18 people for 6 weeks. We're going to be working together, eating together, traveling together. That's a lot of time with the same group of people, and you're going to be tired. Some of you, especially the students, it's your first time really away from home or away from your comforts. So you really have to be able to get along with people, be willing to work hard, and day in and day out. So it does really take a special group of people to do this. And so I'm very careful about who I select. And last year's mission to France was really wonderful, and all the work choosing the team really paid off because they were outstanding, every single one of them.
Let's see. We have another one here, and again, this goes back to that whole thing you were just speaking of about how many the people that want to go. They talk this one here. I think this was. Let me get back to it. Christy and I think what she's asking there is, how does one go about signing up to go with you? Is there a process that people would have to?
initially reach out and contact me. We can have a conversation. Tell me your interests. If you have a loved one who is in the military, that definitely helps. These connections, and your reasons for wanting to go. It starts with a conversation. And I have friends who really want to go, but I just won't take them. I just said, I just know you, and this is just not your thing. But there's other ways you can help out. There's so many ways you can help out. You can help fundraise. You can write letters to your members of government. You can help host meetings. There's so many ways to get involved. But yeah, if this is something that interests you, I can take Americans. There's 2 American volunteers who are coming with me to Austria. Happy to take Americans. American military people with past military experience are wonderful. So it starts with a conversation. Email me, and that's how we get the ball rolling. I usually start picking my team in January. So I'm right now I'm picking my team. So yeah, if this is something you want to do, email me in the fall, and we can have a conversation. And at the end of the conversation, you might be, oh no, this isn't for me, or yes, this is exactly what I want to do.
I think it's important for people to know too that just because you go on these missions and you've done your background and your research, there's absolutely no guarantee you're coming home with a good news story.
Right.
Absolutely not. No. And I think I've told Jeff this. Well, the fans of Curse of Oak Island, there's a lot of time you spend where you don't find anything. And that's the lure of archaeology is, a lot of the times you find nothing. And then sometimes you find what you're looking for. And then sometimes you find what you're looking for, and it just hits you like a ton of bricks. We found, like in France, we found a few things, and everyone just stopped, and it just a quiet just went over the entire team. And it was very emotional for people. And so you got to know yourself. Is this something that I can handle? And again, there's no shame if it's not for you. There's so many other ways that you could really help.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the way that we're trying to help too, by getting the word out. Jenny she did a super chat. Thank you very much, Jenny. Jenny is saying, "Miss seeing you on the show, Aaron. Thanks for sharing what you've been up to, and thanks for taking up the mantle to show gone but not forgotten isn't just words." That's very true.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Bonnie says, definitely contact the Canadian Legion magazine. They will get the message out to local legions. So that's interesting. Canadian Legion magazine.
I'm writing this down.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we have someone too that is here, Jess Grollo. Jess has she does a lot of fundraising. She does a lot of work like this right here, this tumbler that I've got here with my logo and stuff on it that we sell. But she does a lot of different things like that. And she said that, there she is there. My uncle is retired Black Hawk pilot.
Wow.
He mentioned working with Canadians recently. So there is a connection with a helicopter. So there's a connection with a helicopter. So, she can help with fundraising. She's done a lot of different fundraising. So she may contact you. She may have
I hope she does. I hope she does.
Yep. She's pretty wonderful. Tom, did you have another question? I think.
So, just when we think about the different lands and terrains that you go for, like some of them are going to be pretty rugged. Like the one you did in France is a lot of forest and trees.
Yeah.
But what are some of the other types of environments that you've had to work in?
There's jungle. I haven't worked there, but you have the jungles of Vietnam, Laos, where there's a lot of unexploded ordnance. Wherever there's been past conflicts, you can go. So, for example, in Laos, if I go there, I wouldn't take students. There's some places I just wouldn't take students. But yeah, you've got every type of terrain, every type of poisonous snake, insect. But what I tell the students, I ask them, so what's your definition of a successful mission? And they say, well, if we make a recovery. No, that's not my definition of a successful mission. And this is the DPAA's motto too. This isn't just mine. A successful mission is bringing everyone back safely. And so before I take anyone out into the field, I have lots of meetings with DPAA, and I make sure that it's as safe as it can be before I take anyone out into the field. So that's my number one job, is the people I take with me, they're safe and we're doing this properly. And so some missions, I just won't take a big team. I won't take students. And so that's sort of how I look at the different areas that I'm going. And you can have, there's missions in Greenland, there's missions in Asia, there's missions in India. They just really are everywhere.
So the site preparation work. I mean, you mentioned that, for example, in the World War I sites, too much mud, too much unexploded ordnance.
Yeah.
Like you just can't go in there.
Yeah.
Now the other sites, do you have somebody go in ahead of time to do things like, sort of early metal detecting or early bombs to try and determine as much as you can that there's nothing there that's unexploded or extremely dangerous?
Yeah. So the investigation teams go in. The mission reports we also get. So, for example, if they're returning from a bombing mission, they don't have any bombs on. So you get a lot of information from the mission reports, but they do send out a small professional team, an investigation team. And, depending on the site, they will send you out. Bomb specialists will go with you. If you do anything in Southeast Asia, you're going with at least a couple bomb specialists. So the sites that I take my students, it's been cleared that there really isn't much potential for to be dangerous. So they're making sure, the DPA makes sure that we're safe. I'm making sure that we're safe. And I mean, it's a lot of work, but again, at the end of the day, a successful mission is bringing everyone home safely.
That's one of the things that I was thinking about as you were speaking about these teams. And there has to be an unimaginable number of people involved in these things. You talked about the first line, the people that actually researched to find out there was a downed plane and they know where it was, and then go through all the different things like that. How many do you know? Do you have any idea how many recovery teams like the one you run? How many there are? Would seem like there would have to be more than just one. I mean, because
oh yeah, no, I forget. I was told how many missions there are, and I'll get it wrong if I say it. But there's probably 40 missions a year.
wow,
I'm guessing.
wow.
Again, and there's a couple universities in the States that do it. We're the only university in Canada doing it. So if you've got a student attending or thinking about going to university, and this is something that they're interested in, tell them to contact me, because this is something that Acadia is offering, and we're the only university in Canada that's offering this. So my little pitch for Acadia. But yeah, so most of the teams are adults, a lot of military, ex-military. But there are some U.S. universities that are involved in this as well.
Yep. One more question I had was about the cemeteries. You mentioned that sometimes locals will find bodies and they will bury them in a local cemetery someplace.
Right.
Are you able to actually find some of that? And that would probably not be your team that would do that, or maybe, I don't know. But I mean, how is that something that's helps out? Is that, I mean, how does that, how do people go about that to find those?
Yeah. So the investigation team comes and they'll go to the local cemeteries. They'll meet with locals. They'll go to the local cemeteries. But when I was there, I was having locals saying, well, we found a dog tag over, about 200 yards from here, or we found this, or I know where another. And so people are approaching you with new information. But that's one of the things that the investigation team does, and it has happened more than one occasion. where they have located the person and he's been buried in a local cemetery.
What do they do in that case when they find it? They go ahead and just leave the body there and let the family know? I mean, is there, or maybe ask the family what they want to do? I don't know. Is that
well, they still have to properly identify it. So
okay?
before they contact any family member, they need to make a proper identification, which usually is DNA. Because bodies get buried. It might be, they suspect it's this person, but it's another person because there are crashes all over the place. And because and what has happened in the past is you think you're on this airplane 4721, but this airplane is actually 6943. And so you're looking at a completely different aircraft than the one that you think you are. So they really do their due diligence to make sure that the body they've recovered is actually the person that they were looking for. And if it's not, then who is it? And so they're very careful.
Wow. Yeah, this is really, I absolutely love this. And this is why, I was thinking about this when I heard what you were doing, because, we've stayed in touch and Linda has with you as well. And we kind of found out what you were working on. And it was something that I felt that we had to bring out and talk about, because it is one of those things. There's so many different programs out there, like someone mentioned earlier, that so that people aren't forgotten. So these soldiers, these fallen soldiers, are not forgotten about. You mentioned it earlier about the families and how much the family cannot have that closure until there's an answer. And some they will never get that closure. They will never get that answer. And that's so unfortunate and sad. But sometimes, like you mentioned earlier, you will get that closure, and then you can bring that to that family and let them know we found them. And that I can't imagine how that feels for you and the family. It's just such a noble endeavor. It really, as I said that earlier when we got started, and it truly, truly is. I
just like to really thank you, Jeff and Tom, for having me on your show to talk about this. And hopefully we can get something started in Canada. But, getting this opportunity to talk to you, because I always love talking to you. And I really appreciate you and the people who've tuned in tonight to listen to this. It means a lot to me. And thank you.
Thank you so much. And for me, from one Canadian to another, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Tom, you had one more question. I think we have one more.
Yeah, I just to maybe lighten it up a little bit before we go.
Sure.
On the Curse of Oak Island, you had your sweet Jesus moment.
Sweet Jesus. Yeah.
Did you ever find anything on any of these digs or searches that you looked at it and you went, sweet Jesus, what is this?
Yeah, every now and then, because you're right. You got to make it light sometimes. Like, archaeology is hard, and I like to have fun, depending on the situation. And on the Curse of Oak Island, I'm on a treasure hunt. I'm having fun. Like, me and Rick, we would laugh, and Gary, oh my God, we'd crack up. And there'd be times when we'd have to be serious, and there were long days. My back would be screaming, but when you start to get like, oh my God, you're like, I'm on a treasure hunt. Let's have fun. Like, we're doing the same work. We can either have fun and laugh, or we can be all serious, and you can do both. And I just chose every now and then to have a sweet Jesus moment or something,
So you didn't get your big high chair to sit in and supervise all the other archaeologists then?
No, Rick wouldn't let me do that. He is funny. I miss Rick. Yeah. Oh, they're just wonderful people. Wonderful people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's say, do you, Aaron, have a access to Air Force records from CFB, Summerside, World War II?
I don't. I have a lot of access to the U.S. records, but not to the Canadian ones. So if the person with that question would like to send me an email with a link or something like that, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Yeah, that was Kat. Dana asked also for Aaron, have you ever discovered an object on one mission or dig that led you to in a completely different direction? Any surprises?
Not on a mission. Boy, that's a good question. I'd have to think on the top of my head. No big surprises. I mean, the stone road through the swamp was my biggest surprise. When I remember seeing Rick and Ian out there probing the swamp with these big poles
I remember that. Yep.
on the hottest day in July, and I'm going, what are these nut bars doing? There's nothing in the swamp. And Ian's like, I think we have something. Aaron, do you want to do some work in the swamp? I was like, working, sure, all right, I'll do it. And next thing you know, we found this road. So that's been the biggest surprise for me, and maybe the biggest surprise I'll ever have.
Yeah.
And what even surprised me more is I love that swamp. I love being in that swamp.
Is it as smelly and yucky as they say?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. But if you notice, Rick, I remember Rick first would dip his finger. He'd be like, oh, but then he'd find an artifact. And next thing you know, he's down on his knees with me, elbowing me out of the way. It was amazing. Like it was absolutely amazing what we were finding in that swamp. And yeah, so that has been my biggest surprise. I would have never guessed in a million years that something would have been constructed in that triangle. But
yeah, and they're still on it. It's back up right now in the current timeline of the show. They're back there looking for at the end of it underneath the road to see what they can if it continues out into the water. And now they're finding a wooden structure there of some sort. So
there's something going on there. There's something going on there. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, this has been truly wonderful. And I gotta applaud you for what you're doing. I know you have taken this on as a very emotional and passion mission upon yourself. And we want to hear back from you again. I know you said you're going out in May. You're going to probably go out again in June. Wow. That's tremendous. And we hope that you will keep in touch with Tom and I and Linda and let us know how you're doing and what's going on. And we'd love to have you come back and talk about your expanded when you get done. And you might find that you get more people that are going to be contacting you because they want to go. So now we're pushing out to later missions that you're going on. But
yeah. Well, again, thank you so much, Jeff and Tom. I always have time for you guys. And hello to all the Curse of Oak Island fans. And thank you so much for tuning in on this. It means a lot to me. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to look here. Let's see. Linda had one more. Okay. So that's it for us tonight, folks. Again, Dr. Aaron Taylor, we appreciate you so very much. Look at there's Jess saying, Dr. Taylor, I've earned a whole new respect for you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
And I do too. So Tom, thank you so much. Linda, I appreciate all the hard work as always down there. And Dr. Taylor, keep going, keep the mission happening and finding those not forgotten that are out there. Thanks, folks. We'll catch you next time right here on the Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live stream. Jenny, thank you. I see that. Don't be a stranger, Aaron.
Thank you.
We like all the updates on what you're doing. Yes, we do. All right. Night, everyone. Have a great rest of your night and pass this on to your friends. Tell them about this particular podcast so that we can get this word out. We want the Canadian government to really take this seriously and get on. Button. Yep, absolutely. All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.